What is up, ladies and gentlemen and citizens of the world? We are back with our next book versus movie, The Two Towers. We're going to keep going through Lord of the Rings. So, as I said in my last video, I have been a huge fan of The Lord of the Rings since I was at least 12. At least 12. So, a very long time, very significant part of my life. I love the books deeply, and I love the movies deeply. And I realized a very long time ago that you kind of have to enjoy the books and the movies as two slightly different things because I gotta say, Two Towers is not a particularly faithful adaptation. Much as I love it, much as I love Peter Jackson, they changed a lot in this movie. So let's talk about those differences and how well they work. First of all, it's kind of interesting that the book Two Towers begins where the movie Fellowship of the Ring ends. In the book, Two Towers opens with Aragorn and Legolas and all fighting the orcs and then finding Boromir as he's dying, and they have his funeral and send him off down the river and realize Merry and Pippin have been captured, which is where the movie Fellowship of the Ring ends. The first half of The Two Towers follows Aragorn and his group and Merry and Pippin as they're dealing with the Ents and then Helm's Deep. The second half of the book follows Frodo and Sam on their journey to Mordor. That split works very, very well for the book, and I think the movie, in splitting it up so that it kind of goes back and forth between the parties, makes sense, because you don't just want Merry and Pippin to vanish for half the movie and then Frodo and Sam to show up for half the movie and leave everybody else behind. So that change worked well. It did lead to some intriguing changes with the cinematography. So the first half of the second book ends with Gandalf dealing with Saruman after his defeat at Helm's Deep. That is shifted to the movie Return of the King. Similarly, the second half of The Two Towers ends with Frodo and Sam facing down Shelob. Sam thinks that Frodo is dead and that he needs to take up the burden as ring bearer, and it ends with him realizing that Frodo is not dead, but he's been captured by orcs. That also gets moved over to Return of the King, so all of that gets resolved all in the same movie. We're going to tackle that next video. Today, we're just going to talk about what the movie Two Towers did, what it did well, and we could talk about a more faithful adaptation. So, I really love their use of Rohan. I've been a huge fan of Karl Urban pretty much ever since this movie. He played Dr. McCoy in the Star Trek movies. He played an assassin in Retired Extremely Dangerous with Bruce Willis. He played in a brief TV series whose cancellation I will forever hate Fox for. No, it's not Firefly, but it's similar. Really loved Karl Urban's casting as Éomer. I think that he got the valor. I think that he got the ferocity, but also he's a good man. Éowyn is particularly good. Miranda Otto as Éowyn is a frankly inspired choice. And even the things that they changed for the movie, they obviously expanded her character a lot. She has a lot more dialogue. She has a scene with Grima Wormtongue that is not in the book, but it's really beautifully played. You just get this sense of a woman who feels trapped both by convention and by her circumstances, and who is fighting for a way out, and who is willing to go to extreme measures to get out if possible. She also plays really beautifully Éowyn's attraction to Aragorn, and it's heartbreaking and it's really sweet, and I think that she did just a fantastic job at conveying that desperate longing. Now we come to Theoden. Bernard Hill, I think, makes a really great King Theoden. The movie introduces a lot of drama that's not in the book. First of all, in the book, he wasn't exactly possessed by Saruman. It was more that Grima, talking in his ear all these years kind of made him feel like, oh, I'm too old to be doing these things. And when Gandalf comes and speaks to him and breaks that spell of words, he doesn't shed years. He just kind of straightens up. He's still got a long white beard. He's still an old man, but it's oh wow, I guess I'm not as decrepit as I thought it was. You could compare it to Grandpa Joe from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but might be doing a little bit of a disservice to Theoden. Whereas in the movie, you've got this dramatic exorcism, and I think it comes down to Tolkien uses magic more subtly than Peter Jackson does. There's also no giant wizard duel in the Fellowship of the Ring. It's more like you set one will against another. There are fights, but it's not flashy the way that Peter Jackson uses it. I can understand wanting more dramatic magic for the sake of cinematography. Just yelling at a guy does not play quite as well as watching Christopher Lee go flying across the floor, even if it's less faithful to the book. So I don't love it. I don't hate it. I'm willing to accept it. I do have to say his casting and wardrobe for Grima Wormtongue is so obviously evil that it's a little much. Because in the book, like the king considers him a faithful counselor and gives him several opportunities to repent and to turn back and prove himself a faithful man of Rohan. Whereas this Grima, you take one look at him and you're like, oh no man, he's gonna stab you in the back as soon as you turn around. So I don't know, I feel like a slightly more palatable Grima would have been interesting to see. Somebody that you're like, yeah, I can see why the king would trust this guy. Another difference is that throughout the book, The Two Towers, Anduril, Aragorn's reforged sword, becomes increasingly more important. So I can now confirm, no, he doesn't get the sword reforged until Return of the King in the movie series. In the book, he's already got it. And it's basically, it'd be like somebody going to war with Excalibur for us. You know, like it's this hugely recognized sword. And a big theme in The Two Towers is this idea of myths and legends coming back to life. With the Ents, with Anduril, with the hobbits, that apparently like very few people actually know anything about hobbits within the world of Middle-earth, which is kind of an intriguing choice. People like maybe have heard of them, but overall they're like, oh yeah, who is this? And then also there are a lot of references to their journey through Lothlorien. In Rohan, and then when they meet Captain Faramir later on, everybody mentions, yeah, we've traveled through Lothlorien, we met the Lady Galadriel. And the men are immediately like, oh yeah, she's a witch, isn't she? Like, that sounds really dangerous. And it's this sense that they used to know a lot more about elves, and over the years that has turned into myth and legend, and now this myth is still around. There are people who've actually seen and talked to her. Like, it's just kind of amazing, you know? It'd be like hearing random reports of people named Galahad or Lancelot or Gawain, you know? All of a sudden you're like, why are all these guys from Arthurian myths running around? Why is there this guy who's got this sword that he claims is Excalibur? Like, what is going on? So it's a much bigger deal in the book than it is in the movie. Of course, that's also because the movie added that whole entire subplot with Aragorn trying to decide whether or not he wants to accept his birthright as king, which plays into his relationship with Éowyn and with Arwen, because the movie introduces a subplot in which Arwen is persuaded by her father to renounce Aragorn and to sail off to the Undying Lands, and she's basically giving up on hope. So when Éowyn meets him, Aragorn's kind of thinking he's a free man, so maybe flirts a little more than he would have were he purely committed to Arwen, which was all completely made up for the movie. I don't love it. Like, I mean, I think Éowyn is fantastic. I think having Arwen and Aragorn, these star-crossed lovers, is just kind of dumb. I think as far as Sam and Frodo go, that whole segment just kind of plays out. All of their interactions with Gollum seem more violent than they need to be. Like, Sam yanks him around with the rope. When Faramir's men attack them, they kick and beat Gollum, and you're just kind of like, it's really unnecessarily violent. You're like, y'all need to calm down just a little bit. In the book, they're not nearly so rough with him. Like, they're not gentle, but it's more in a way of they're manhandling him a little bit. They're not slamming him into walls like they do in the movie. And the books feel like civilized people dealing with desperate circumstances. The movie, you get more of a sense of savagery to their interactions, and I rather like the civilized feeling. At the heart of the books, and what is missing from the movie, is this deep sense of good versus evil. In the book, Faramir tells Frodo and Sam, before he knows that Frodo carries the One Ring, before he's even fully aware of what it was that his brother went to seek answers for, if I found it by the side of the road, I wouldn't touch it. Because based on context clues, Faramir has realized that whatever this great weapon is, it is something evil, and it's something that he wants no part of. In the movie, when he figures out that they've got the One Ring, he takes Frodo and Sam to Osgiliath, intending to present them to his father, because he wants desperately to win his father's approval. The tension in the books is drawn from Faramir, as a good and just man, needs to follow the laws of his lands, but the law in this case is not right for the situation, so he winds up making a judgment call to let them go and help them on their way, fully aware that he's going to get in trouble for this. The movie has the tension of his strained relationship with Denethor and his attempt to curry Denethor's favor, and like he falls to the Lord of the Ring. Apparently, Peter Jackson changed that because he could not imagine Faramir refusing the call of the ring when Boromir fell to it. And I think that goes back to misunderstanding the nature of good and evil. Similarly, he changes the Ents interaction. In the book, Merry and Pippin meet Treebeard in the forest, and through his conversation with them, he decides that the time has come to deal with Saruman. He's aware that the Ent's time is basically over, but if the world is to remain for the next races, he needs to help put an end to evil. So they decide, like, the time has come to do something about Saruman. In the movie, he joins the fight after he has seen Saruman's depredations at the edge of his forest. It works for shortening the movie. It works for providing a quick and immediate reason for Treebeard to go to war. It kind of loses some of the sense that good people have to stand against evil. And both Faramir and Treebeard were fantastic representations of that in the book. That sense that when you see that something is wrong, you do something. I would like to see an adaptation that really delves into that sense of what is good. I think Theoden also exemplifies that. In the book, once he's been rescued from the power of Saruman, he immediately decides to go to war because he has to rescue his people. He's got to fight Saruman. He's got to drive him out of his lands. In the movie, he doesn't want to fight Saruman. They have to retreat to Helm's Deep and they have to stand out against the orcs because otherwise they're going to be destroyed. But there's no sense of we're marching to war to defend what is ours and what is good in this world. So Jackson touched on that with Sam's speech at the end of the movie, but I think that he did miss the mark with these two characters. And I think reading the book just gives you a completely different view of both Treebeard and Faramir. So I'm always going to say read the book. The books are just really good. Overall, the movies are fun. They hold together very well. I think Jackson is very consistent with characterization. I think Billy Boyd as Pippin in particular has some absolutely delightful facial expressions. I think the book has a depth and a timelessness to it that the movies don't quite match. Even if Howard Shore's music is absolutely a soundtrack for the ages. So anyway, we're going to be wrapping things up with The Return of the King and then moving on to Kill a Mockingbird. If y'all enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I'll see you next week.